All right, welcome everyone to the Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 Tumwater City Council work session. Sorry, we're having just a minute or so late. I was having technical difficulties. So with that, we will do roll call. And I believe everyone is here. So we have all council members. Our first item on the agenda is the Davis Meeker Oak Tree Risk Assessment Final Report Briefing. And City Administrator Parks will start us off with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, and welcome, council members. I am very pleased to have here with us two very qualified folks who have been helping the city a lot over the last few weeks, few months. It has been a few months. It seems like it's time flies when we're having fun. So I am just going to introduce Rick and Todd and then turn it over to them. And then I would encourage council members to ask questions as we go, but also realize that this is a pretty technical presentation and your questions may get answered sometime in a next slide, but we definitely want to make sure that we have all the time necessary for you all to ask whatever questions you may have. And then at the end of Rick and Todd's presentation, I do have a summary of some of the implications that we're looking at, or considerations that we're looking at in terms of what are some of the implications of these recommendations, very preliminary cost estimates. So if there's interest in talking about that on the part of the council members, we could certainly talk about those things as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Todd Prager and Associates, and I think that he will take it from there, including introductions of his cohort, Rick Till. There you go, Todd.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having us, Mayor and members of the City Council. We're really excited to be able to talk with you. I know you've probably seen our report, which is pretty technical and detailed, but this is an opportunity to kind of talk it over, answer any questions you have. There's a lot of information in there, and we can kind of help walk you through the work we've done over the past few months. Rick and I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, so if possible, I'd like to share my screen and kind of walk you through some visuals, because visuals really do help when we're talking about a tree to look at the specific things we're talking about. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And then can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay. And
It's still though in presentation. It's not in presentation mode. It has the thing on the side. There you go.
There we go. Okay. All right. So just to introduce myself, I'm Todd Prager. I am the principal and owner of my consulting firm, Todd Prager and Associates. I'm a board certified master arborist, a registered consulting arborist with the American Society of Consulting Arborists, and then also tree risk assessment qualified, which is a qualification from the International Society of Arboriculture for conducting tree risk assessments as we've gone through. And then I also am qualified to do appraisals of plants and trees, which was not included as part of this, but just another qualification about my background. I've been doing tree arborist consulting work for about 22 years now, and have done many tree risk assessments throughout my career, including risk assessments on Oregon white oaks, like we have as our subject tree. And we're just really excited to work with you on that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rick to introduce himself.
Hi, I want to start by thanking the City Council, and particular thanks for Mayor Sullivan and city staff for the opportunity to work on this project. Definitely an interesting project, and I appreciate your collaboration through this process. Yeah, I'm also a board certified master arborist and ISA tree risk assessment qualified. My background is in conservation and natural resource management. And then for the last 9 or so years, been doing strictly tree related work, more hands-on tree management and a lot of tree risk assessment and collaborating with property owners and tree management in at times very complicated tree management in residential settings in the Portland area. And then over the last 25 years, a lot of research and study into Oregon white oak ecosystems and habitat benefits and review of the scientific literature about their growth habits and just very passionate about learning more about them and passionate about helping communities make reasoned decisions about how to manage their trees.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And one thing I wanted to kind of highlight about Rick is that we're really lucky in this case in that Rick is also a climbing arborist. So he is qualified to actually, do aerial inspections, climb up the tree, look at the tree himself, which is kind of unique because most of the time when you're doing consulting on these types of situations, you have a climber take information and then kind of give it to the consultant back onto the ground. So you're not actually seeing it firsthand. In this case, Rick has seen all of the parts of the tree that he evaluated. So that's kind of important information. With that, I just want to give a really brief background. Rick's going to go into a lot more detail with his report, but of course, the subject tree is, approximately 400 years old, Oregon white oak, native to the Tumwater area, and it's a Tumwater heritage tree. As you all know, there was a failure back in May of 2023 of an 18-inch diameter branch onto the adjacent highway, fell from over 40 feet above ground, and it failed during calm weather, so not during a storm event, as far as we know. The risk assessment that was completed previously it was kind of initiated after that failure event, and it included a sonic tomography at the base of the trunk of the tree, which kind of gives you almost an X-ray cross section of what the trunk inside of the trunk looks like at that location. In addition, there was also an aerial or climbing inspection of various parts of the trees, including past failures and then the present or the May 2023 failure. Based on the information that was available and gathered at that time, there was a primary recommendation to remove the tree. So kind of bringing you up to present, our firm was brought in to give a second opinion on the risk assessment, conduct our own independent risk assessment. We did review the background information, including previous analysis that was completed. But we did complete our own analysis with the benefit of gathering additional data, taking another aerial inspection. Rick's going to talk about doing some root crown excavation, uncovering roots at the base of the tree, and then also taking several sonic tomography readings, both at the base of the tree and then up along the trunk and into the stems. We took that information, analyzed the results, and then categorized risk using the International Society of Arboriculture's tree risk assessment process. After categorizing risk as a standard, we provided some various mitigation options to reduce risk. And that's for your consideration and part of the discussion tonight. And finally, we kind of distilled all that information into what's called a level 3 or advanced tree risk assessment report, which was the arborist report that was delivered as the final deliverable to the city. So with that background, I'm going to pass it over to Rick. I'm going to still be advancing the slides for him and as he goes through his presentation.
Thank you, Todd. Not sure if my face is showing up on the screen or if that makes a difference. I'm not sure who has control of that, but I'll just jump into it. I wanted to start with just a little bit of context on the tree risk assessment process that the ISA uses. This is not an objective system. It's defined as being qualitative, not quantitative. So there's inherent subjectivity in how we do this, and that bears out in the literature reviewing how tree risk assessments are performed. And some of our ratings vary based on assessor to assessor in the context that we're working in. And the risk ratings that are the outputs are not definitive prescriptions on what to do. It provides context and information for decision makers and the risk manager, which in this case is the city, to make informed decisions. And in that process, it is what to do. It depends on a lot of things: policy decisions, budget, pros and cons, risk tolerance, and
Is it just me or did he freeze?
I think he froze up.
uh-oh.
There you go.
Sorry, yeah, just if I freeze, please let me know. My internet connection may not be that great.
Froze again.
It looks like I am.
Yeah. You're
I'm back. Very frustrating. I apologize for that. It was working great until just now. So the risk.
Turning your screen off, sometimes that helps your video.
Yes, let's shut down the video. Okay, let's try that. And if it gets too bad, I'll have to punt it to Todd and he can improvise his way through. So yeah, back to the risk assessment methodology. There is variation in risk ratings. The ratings are there to provide information to the risk manager to make informed decisions. Jumping right into it. First slide just is a map of the tree. So we're talking about the same tree parts. At the bottom, and it splits into two forks at around 16 feet. The southwest stem extends towards the hangar. There's a central stem that extends all the way to the peak of the tree, and an east branch that I label as east or northeast branch throughout the report is on the left side. Note that the highway does not run north-south, so when you're standing on the ground, you are, but it isn't. So if you're ever out on the ground looking at that, there may be calibrate your directions to the report because that can be confusing. I wish the road went straight north-south. All of this would be much easier if it did, but that's what we have. Then on to the next slide. That next slide, I'm frozen here.
I think you're back.
Okay, next slide. This is the aerial inspection. Note the ground level in the slide with the gravel around the base. That's the buried stem, and then up at 16 feet, our collaborator Robert Bundy is doing an inspection there. He's also a board-certified master arborist with vast amount of experience. And then on the right, we've got a photo of that included union. When we stuck a probe into that, it encountered stiff resistance, indicating that there wasn't any decay obvious based on the physical examination. And we didn't see any dead wood or fruiting bodies or any indications of decay between those two stems, which included bark. It's normally can be an indicator of concern. We didn't see any additional areas of concern with that union. And then the sonic tomography, which we'll see a little bit later, was performed on both stems, just above, as close to the union as we could get, and then just below that union. And that showed presentation. Could do the next slide.
I think we might have lost.
Next slide, please.
There you go. Okay.
Thank-
I don't think we got any of the
We didn't get anything on
observations
this one.
slide. This is, no, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then the second codominant union, and just below that on the kind of southeast side is an old wound from roughly 2012. Determined that part.
So maybe we might have,
That branch failed. Notably, that correlates with a severe ice storm that was recorded in a long-term oak management project that the Forest Service is conducting in the South Puget Sound area, likely correlating with that the codominant union.
Rick, is there, I'm missing the bulk of what you're saying. And I think Debbie, our mayor, was trying to say maybe Todd could take over.
Yeah, that might have to happen.
yeah, and then
Apologize
maybe
for
just
this.
come back in. Maybe just go ahead and come back in. Sometimes that was part of my issue
can see-
earlier. I had to read. I had
If
to.
I my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I was wondering too if potentially he could call in.
Yeah.
And then, that might be easier too. But yeah, I can pick up and kind of actually back up a little bit if you missed anything on this slide. So Rick was discussing that this tree splits into two what's called codominant leaders. So two trunks at about 16 feet above ground. And this is a point where there can be structural weakness and cracking, potential decay, and issues. But there was some probing. This was Robert Bundy, a sub-consultant of ours that also completed the tree risk assessment. He probed into this area and found solid wood. There's no fungal fruiting bodies seen, decay. So this union was determined from the probing to be sound. We also, as we'll get to later, took some readings, sonic tomography readings below this union to look for decay or structural weakness, and then also above the union in both stems. So this is the second codominant union kind of above in this area. So this is the one we were discussing previously. And then these are the stems of the east branch that splits above that. Here's another view of that second codominant union. This is a previous failure that occurred in, according to what we could gather from looking at Google Street View, actually, which is a really great tool to kind of figure out when things happen in the past. We believe that this failure occurred around 2012 and could have been associated with an ice storm, which there was several, many documented failures during that time, according to an oak study that I believe Rick referenced earlier. This is a close-up of that. The reason it's pointing here is there's good wound growth. So this is growth that is actually helping to seal over that wound. And it's a good sign that the tree is responding and kind of adding some structural integrity to the tree and also attempting to seal off this wound from the outside. And then another view of these stems as we're kind of looking down from above. So it looks like, Rick, are you back into the meeting now?
I'm gonna try and get Rick a phone number to call in with so that we can add him as a panelist through a phone number, and that way he can just mute his computer audio and hopefully provide that. But I'm trying to get him a phone number to use. So if you
Okay.
can keep going, that'd be great.
All right, sounds good. All right, so now we're on to the May 2023 failure that really precipitated the risk assessment previously and the removal recommendation that happened subsequent to that. So this failure occurred at the central stem. So again, we're looking up at this portion of the tree. Here is a detailed view of that failure, and some interesting things to note and important things to note on this is that we have a few things going on. One is there's discolored wood here. So this is older wood that indicates that there was a failure or damage that occurred prior to the rest of the damage that we're seeing in this stem. Another issue is that we're seeing fungal mycelial growth, which is indicates that there's fungus growing in this area, this kind of whitish area. We took samples of this to determine what that was, and I think Rick's going to talk about that a little bit later of what we found there, and that's a really important finding as part of this failure. And then another aspect is that there's wound wood growth occurring from this failure, which indicates that the tree is responding to the failure that occurred. Now, as we're moving up the tree, we're going further up the central stem. And what we're seeing here is this kestrel cavity, which is kind of an area of habitat or nesting for a falcon type species. And what we did here was we probed into this stem to kind of get a measurement of the amount of decay that we're seeing. And as you can see, this is the probe going into that cavity, and where the flag is shows that this stem is mostly hollow at this location. And then along where we are now is the East Branch. This is a failure. You can see this failure from the ground. It's a stub of that failure. And we don't know exactly when this occurred, but it's part of the history of failures of this tree. And again, this is over the roadway, so an important location of a failed branch. Here's another view of the historic failure, showing what's important here again is wound wood growth over that failure, and just kind of comparing that wound wood growth to the wound wood that occurred in the May 2023 failure. So that kind of orients you to the failures that have occurred, in the past in this tree. That was the results of the aerial inspection that occurred. And now we're kind of moving on to the sonic tomography results. And again, that's more or less, you can think of it as almost like a MRI of the tree, or shows you a cross section of the tree, what it looks like from the inside, and occurring from the base. And we took several readings up along the trunk. So this first image is, well, to the left, this is where this first reading was taken at the base of the trunk. And it compares our reading that we did late last year with the reading that was completed as part of the initial assessment by the prior consultant. And what's important to see here is that we're corroborating that we're seeing there was a different system used, a different brand of technology, but essentially they're showing a similar pattern of decay in both stems. And this was the most substantial portion of decay that we saw. So there is essentially a thin shell wall of sound wood at the base of the trunk, and then significant decay in the interior. Now, this is the, we took 8 sonic tomography readings total throughout the trunk of the tree. And so the first one is in the previous slide, and then the remaining 7 are in this slide. And what we did was we transposed the readings and kind of indicated where they were along the trunk and within each stem. And the main takeaway of this is that what the results showed is that there was really insignificant strength loss along the remaining portion of the trunk. So the most significant strength loss was at the base of the tree, but these remaining readings showed that the tree has pretty substantial holding wood remaining for structural integrity. Now, this next slide is kind of depicts the air spading that was done, or root crown excavation. So what this involves is taking a strong stream of air, blowing away soil around the base of the trunk to expose what's called the root crown of the tree. The reason we want to do this is, well, the air is used, rather than like a shovel or an excavator, because it really causes minimal damage to the tree's root system. But in addition to that, it helps us see what's going on at the base of the trunk, if there is fungal fruiting bodies, decay, anything's root loss, anything we should really be significantly concerned about. And I see, Lisa, you had a hand up.
I think that we have Rick on the line, and he's in the panelist. So Rick, you want to turn your phone login on and see if we can hear you? It looks like your phone is still muted. Tracy, can you unmute him from your location?
It doesn't give me the option. He has to do it on his end.
Okay.
How do you want to go
Well-
ahead and continue until we can get him back on?
Yeah, I'm just going to send him a message to unmute. All right. So yeah, we uncovered the root crown of the tree using pneumatic excavation or that strong stream of air. Also, a lot of people call it air spading. That's the tool that's used. And what we found here was this was the cavity that was kind of previously at ground level. There was we did some probing in this cavity. There was sound wood, around where that cavity is, but more importantly, we did not find really any significant decay or indication of fungal fruiting bodies kind of in that root crown area. So we were really surprised about the good condition of the root crown from that excavation.
Todd, you want to see if Rick can talk now? It looks like he's unmuted. Can we hear you, Rick?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't have a internet connection now. It's just, so I can't see the slide, and Todd's covering this part pretty well. So maybe I just listen and chime in with any follow-up based on what Todd is saying.
That sounds great. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, and I just
sorry about this.
Yeah, I want to apologize. So just as a little background, Rick was traveling and his father had a medical issue and he had to extend his travel. So he's kind of doing the best he can from a hotel room and has a lot going on right now. So that's what's going on with the connection there. So that kind of walks us through what we observed. And that's a lot of information, a lot of data. And the next step is really to make sense of all of that data. So what does this mean? We've seen decay in some parts of the tree, pretty significant. We've seen other areas of the tree that look pretty sound. There's varies based on the part of the tree that we're looking at. The base or the crown of the tree, interior of the trunk, had the worst strength loss. Up along the stem, we had seen, really pretty minimal strength loss from the wood. There's been several failures in the past that occurred, some during calm weather, some perhaps precipitated by storm events. So we need to kind of make sense of it all. And that's part of the tree risk assessment process, where we take the information and then categorize risk and then assign risk ratings. So our role as the consultant is we're the tree risk assessor. We provide the risk ratings. We provide options for mitigation. We provide what's called residual risk ratings, or what the remaining risk is after performing mitigation, whether it's pruning, soil treatments, whatever it may be. Now, the city's role is to be the tree risk manager. It's the city's role to decide what they want to do with the information that's provided. And that can range from removing the tree, that removes all risk, to doing nothing, that keeps whatever the current risk is at the time, or doing some risk mitigation while preserving the tree. It's not the arborist's role to tell the city what to do. It's not our decision. And only the city can make that determination. And the factors that you all have to decide is, things like budget. How much investment, do you want to continue to make into this tree? What your risk tolerance level is. We have clients that are extremely risk averse. They want to make sure nothing ever happens that could cause damage or injury in the future. Some are more risk tolerant and are willing to kind of weigh the benefits that the trees provided and the risk that all trees pose. So I just want to make that clear, that our role is not to tell you what to do with this tree. We're providing the information that we've gathered. So the risk assessment process, it kind of boils down to these, the risk categorization process boils down to these matrices. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a column. It says the likelihood of failure, which can range from imminent, like that's a failure that's happening right, could happen at any moment, to improbable, where a failure is not likely to happen in the foreseeable future. Now, when you look at the likelihood of failure, you base it on a time frame, and so it's not just failure at any point in the time in the future, but like in this case, we set the time frame at 5 years. So we also look, if you look across the likelihood matrix, there is a likelihood of impact, and that means how likely is a tree to impact a particular target, whether it's the street, the airport hangar, parking underneath the tree. And you can create kind of this analysis for the various targets that could be impacted. So in this case, we analyzed several different targets, including most importantly, the highway running underneath the tree, but also the airport hangar, parking, and other targets surrounding the tree. The likelihood of failure, and the reason we have this circled, is the highest likelihood of failure that we found is possible. And in reviewing the past arborist report, that's consistent with what the previous arborist found, was that the highest likelihood of failure is possible. And why that's important is when you look across the likelihood matrix, even if the likelihood of impacting a target is high, which in our case, we determined that the road, the highway underneath the tree, if a part of the tree were to fail that's hanging over the road, there would be a high likelihood it could impact somebody traveling underneath that tree. But even with the high likelihood, the likelihood matrix finds that with a possible likelihood of failure rating, the somewhat likely is the result of the likelihood matrix. So that's likelihood of failure plus impact is somewhat likely. That's the highest rating that resulted. Now, so you go down to this next to categorize this next matrix to categorize risk, which can go from low to extreme. Extreme is like, this is an emergency. High is really significant concern. And then you have kind of grading down to low and moderate. When you have a likelihood of failure and impact at the somewhat likely rating, even the highest rating you can have for the risk rating is moderate. So the consequences of failure, even though they range from negligible to severe, we rated that if a significant branch were to fail from the tree onto the highway, it would be a severe consequence. If somebody was injured or killed, the risk rating result based on this somewhat likely rating here only puts us at a moderate risk. So that was the highest rating of the most kind of significant result of the analysis. And
I'll chime in real quick on this. Just a point of clarification. The prior arborist report did list the likelihood of failure as probable and likelihood of impact is high, that's where that shift alters the outcome. But I feel pretty confident that possible is the best fit given the definition provided in the track system. Also note that like immediately after failures, our senses are a little bit more heightened as far as risk rating. So, and that difference between probable, possible, and improbable, when we look at the definitions, the terms get a little squishy, and we have to fill in some practical wisdom and common sense in how we interpret those. But one takeaway, I think, is that those definitions drive the outcomes, and then sometimes splitting hairs between them, say, with the matrix for consequences of failure, as soon as you get to somewhat likely, the difference between significant and severe isn't much. You've got a moderate risk, so let's not split hairs on some of this.
Yeah, and Rick, I mean, this is a point, and I know that I'm going over it, but we want to kind of describe where the reasonable divergence in opinions between the prior assessment and our assessment occurred, because as we said in the beginning, there can be reasonable divergence of opinion because of the subjectivity of the risk assessment process. But if Rick, you have available the definitions of possible versus probable, if you could kind of describe.
Yeah. A possible likelihood of failure is failure may be expected in extreme weather conditions, but is unlikely during normal weather conditions within the specified time frame. Probable is failure may be expected under normal weather conditions within the specified time frame. And then improbable is not likely to fail during normal weather conditions and may not fail in extreme weather. If you look at too closely at these definitions, you start to scratch your head and wondering what the difference is. But I think the main thing is that under normal weather, we don't expect the remaining branches on this tree to fail based on our visual inspection and the updated sonic tomography and the fungal testing and identifying what's going on. And based on the information we have, that possible definition is the best fit based on normal weather. Those definitions are in the body of the report if people want to look more closely at it. But that really drives the outcomes in this particular case.
Okay. Okay, so this is the matrix, and this is from the report that categorizes risk for, actually we looked at 6 parts of the tree and categorized risk for each of those parts. The first part was the whole tree, and we looked at these following targets: people that are traveling along the highway, the airport hangar, the parking area where vehicles are located, and then the parking area where people may be occupying that area temporarily. Again, we looked at the likelihood of the entire tree failing within the next 5-year time frame. And as Rick described, we classified that likelihood as possible. The likelihood of the tree impacting any of these targets, again, ranging from low to high, varied based on kind of the orientation of the tree, prevailing winds, and kind of where the weight of the tree is. So the highest likelihood of impact actually is the tree falling towards the entire tree falling towards the hangar. And the lowest would be that it's falling towards where people are parked, and people happen to be in the area when the tree falls. So when we go through, so actually I want to point out Highway 99, because that's the most significant target that we're evaluating, people along Highway 99, there's a medium likelihood of the entire tree falling into Highway 99. It could fall in that way, but there's many other directions that the tree could fall in. When you go through the likelihood matrix that we showed before, taking the combination of likelihood of failure and impact on Highway 99, it is somewhat likely for failure and impact along Highway 99 when you go through the matrix. But when you look at the hangar, it's a fixed target. It's not something that is temporarily there. It's somewhat likely that that's going to happen. The consequences of the tree falling into the roadway and falling into the hangar would be severe. It's something that we don't want to happen. When we go through the risk rating, again, because of the medium likelihood that the tree is going to fall into the roadway, even though the consequences would be severe, the risk rating comes out as low. The highest risk rating, partially because the hangar is a fixed target, it is for the hangar at moderate. So we highlighted the areas where the risk rating was anywhere higher than low. So, this can be a little challenging because there's a lot of words that aren't always intuitive, but if you think about situations where, okay, people in the parked area, obviously we don't want the entire tree to fall into a person, injure them, kill them. That would be a severe consequence. But the likelihood of somebody being underneath that tree in this parked area, when there's a failure of the entire tree, is, likelihood of failure and impact, it's unlikely. So even though it's severe, the risk rating comes out as low. So for whole tree failure, again, highest risk rating is moderate. Now, the stem that we looked at, the first codominant stem on the roadside, we took it through the matrix. Yes, it could fall into the road, but it's improbable that that's going to occur based on our analysis in the next 5 years. So that puts us back to a risk rating of low.
And then I'll chime in real quick on that one, and then the whole tree failure. Part of that analysis was looking at the crown weight of the tree. We didn't include this in the slides, but attachment 4 has a map where I approximated the crown shape and where the mass of the tree is centered, which is mostly to the southwest. So the probability of the whole tree falling towards the road is reduced because of the massive weight being to the southwest. And that's also where the likelihood of that central stem failing at that codominant attachment, I rated that lower because the mass of that central stem and the crown weight is more to the southwest. And that was based both on our aerial inspection and looking at the crown while we were in the tree. And then I also took measurements of all of those portions from the ground. And then I drew an approximation of that in that attachment 4. So that's part of the on-site assessment of the likelihood of impact and likelihood of failure for those parts of the tree.
And then moving on to this first order codominant stem on the hangar side of the tree, based on our analysis and aerial inspection, sonic tomography, again, we categorize the likelihood of failure as possible. The likelihood of that hangar being impacted as high. Again, it's right within that fall zone of the tree. Going through the likelihood matrix, it's somewhat likely. Likelihood of failure and impact is somewhat likely. And then the consequences would be significant. Not not severe because it's not the entire tree coming down, but just one of the stems. And the building could likely withstand severe damage from that failure occurring. So as we go through this risk rating, this is the highest at moderate. We included risk mitigation options for each of these. The most important one and kind of the theme is what's called crown reduction pruning. That was discussed in the previous arborist report as a mitigation option. And what crown reduction does is it helps bring the kind of mass of the tree in, or it makes it smaller. So you have less surface area that is exposed to things like wind forces. You have less mass kind of at the exterior of the tree and kind of bring that center of gravity in so that failures are reduced potentially. We didn't get into the specifics of exactly how much reduction pruning or exactly where that would occur. That's something that could occur as a next step should the city decide to implement this risk mitigation option. But it is something that if implemented, we believe that will cause the residual risk of the tree to move into the low category, make it a lower risk tree. And then these are the final three parts of the tree that we assessed. This is the stem to the northeast east side of this tree. And again, that's really important part because it impacts the roadway. Again, we put the likelihood of failure at possible, likelihood of somebody along this roadway being impacted by a failure as high. And that puts you again at this somewhat likely combination of likelihood of failure and impact. Consequences would be severe if somebody were impacted in a traveling vehicle by this failure. And again, the risk rating would get to the moderate level. So this is the highest level of these last three parts that we assessed. We also looked at the second order codominant stem on the southwest of the tree. This part is kind of in a less traveled area, so a lower likelihood of people being impacted, which pushes this risk rating to the low overall rating. And then finally, we looked at this central stem above that kestrel cavity, which had a significant amount of decay. Again, all possible likelihood of failure in the next 5 years, but where that stem is oriented for these targets, it from a medium likelihood of impacting somebody along Highway 99 to very low for these other parts of the tree. And this, even though consequences would be severe again for Highway 99, the results for the risk rating puts it into the low category. And again, the risk mitigation options, the most important one is that reduction pruning to kind of bring that mass of the tree in, so the likelihood of failure is reduced. We believe that the residual risk, would stay in the low level for this. We could potentially reduce the risk to the low level, but it might be reduced, but still stay in the moderate level, even with reduction pruning. So this is the highest level of the residual risk, even when you implement the risk mitigation options. These are the risk management alternatives that we presented we provided pros and cons for your consideration as you kind of balance and decide what you want to do with this tree moving forward. And this helps give you an idea of kind of the pluses and minuses of each of these risk mitigation options. So the alternatives that we provided were kind of which is doing a basic prune of the tree. Nothing really significant. This is not the crown reduction that we had discussed, but doing some root zone management, improving the rooting condition, and then monitoring the tree maybe in another 5-year time frame. This is a management option you can consider, and probably the most significant pro is that the investments are pretty modest. The cons are you're not really substantially reducing risk with that management option. Option B is the reduction pruning.
Todd, I have a question.
Yes.
So what's the price difference between A and B?
So Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, are you going to be presenting kind of like some cost estimates?
Yes,
Options at the end?
yeah, we have some, so Councilmember Jefferson, we have some very high level preliminary numbers based on, there are numbers provided in the report for each certain components of each one of these strategies. So for example, the basic prune, the root zone management, the monitor, we've tried to identify all those costs, as well as others associated with, for example, traffic control and getting permits and that type of thing. So I have one slide that shows a very high level range of costs for the recommended zone, and I can cover that when we get there. But all of those preliminary costs are also qualified by virtue of a whole lot of decision making that would have to occur in terms of understanding, I'll use traffic control as an example. If we have our crews do traffic control and provide detours, it might cost less than if we, for example, hire somebody to perform traffic control at the site during activity as it's occurring. So there's a bunch of different factors that play into the decision on how to implement each of these different recommendations and what they cost over time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the next option is the one that we highlighted as a prudent option if you decide to retain this tree. And this would be a more significant investment because it involves that reduction pruning. It also involves installing supplemental support, which can mean basically different types of cabling. And what cabling does is a few things. One, it helps reduce movement of the branches, especially in a storm event, so that you're not having them kind of flex and potentially reduce the risk of a failure from reducing that movement of the branches. Another potential benefit of the supplemental support or cabling is that it can help essentially catch a failure from allowing a branch to fall all the way onto the ground and kind of suspend it. So that can be a pretty effective risk reduction technique. Now, there's a lot of considerations. You can't necessarily tell exactly what's going to happen with a actually, you can't predict what the tree's response is going to be when it fails if there's a dynamic cable. So we can't guarantee that a cable or a supplemental support system is going to for sure stop the tree from swinging into a potential target, but it reduces that likelihood. In addition, there's root zone management and monitoring involved. The biggest pro to this option is that if you're retaining the tree, it is significantly reduces risk without necessarily breaking the bank. The main con is that, well, one, reduction pruning is a significant impact to the tree. So you're removing live foliage, you're reducing the tree's kind of ability to photosynthesize, and it could, if done too aggressively, cause decline of the tree. Another significant consideration is that, especially with the supplemental support system, you have to really regularly maintain, monitor, and adjust these systems so that they remain effective. So once you do it, you're kind of tied into the supplemental support, and you got to keep maintaining them. Otherwise, they lose effectiveness. So it creates an ongoing cost and responsibility for the city. And then the other two options are, C is really pretty similar to B, except we're adding the idea of moving targets that are possible to move. I mean, obviously we can't move the roadway, but things like removing parking spots that are within the impact area of the tree, that is reasonably possible to do. Could be expensive, might not be popular to remove parking. And the amount of risk, again, because parking is a temporary thing that happens under the tree, you may not be getting a lot of bang for your buck in that option. But it does add another level of benefit because you're removing target and you're improving the rooting area of the tree by removing impervious surfaces, allowing more soil area for the tree, and kind of overall improving that environment. And then the last option, which again, this is a reasonable management option. It was recommended previously, depending on your risk level, is removal. Obviously, this eliminates all risk. There won't be concern about somebody getting injured from the tree after it's removed. Obviously, the main con is you're losing a historic tree that's a feature for many in the community. So you have to kind of weigh that cost benefit analysis of the risk that you live with any tree, and the benefits the tree provides, potential for people to be injured. Again, we recommended option B as a prudent alternative if you are to preserve the tree. Obviously, we can't substitute our judgment for yours, but when we looked at the option of preserving the tree, of the preservation options, it seemed reasonable that doing some reduction pruning, some supplemental support to help reduce the risk of branch failure, and root zone management, ongoing monitoring, that's a reasonable risk reduction option without going beyond that with removing parking spaces and kind of doing target management. So of those preservation options, option B is what we feel is a reasonable one to select. And then we understand that the ISA tree risk assessment process, the words are not necessarily intuitive. There can be different opinions on, for example, possible versus probable likelihood of failure. There's certainly subjectivity into any risk assessment. So we decided to, even though this wasn't the basis of decision-making, run this tree through different models, just as a kind of a basis for comparison and to see what the results were with different tree risk assessment models. And those two models that we looked at were one called VALID, and the other one was called TreeCalc. And I'm gonna, Rick has been through the VALID training and is familiar with the TreeCalc more so than I am. So I'm gonna have Rick kind of chime in here on what this kind of like analysis resulted in.
Yeah, trying on the internet again. Fingers crossed that this works well. I'm in a better location with the trade-off of risk of background noise interrupting. Yeah, VALID is a program out of England that is tied to International Standards Organization Tolerability of Risk Framework. It gets kind of complicated, but in a nutshell, I ran it through that program and it generated an acceptable level of risk, which means this is a risk that it's acceptable for an entity or a person to impose this risk on the public. And I ran that for both whole tree failure and that east stem. There's more context for this in the attachments to the report. Notably, VALID also provides a tree risk management strategy that a municipality can use to manage overall tree risk. That would be something to explore overall in managing the population of trees. TreeCalc is a program that you enter in variables for trunk diameter, height, the height of the crown, so like where the crown begins, percent hollowness up to 80%. And then you can include a hollow on the side of the opening on the side of the tree. And I kind of put in the worst case scenario for hollowness and the cavity. And based on, and then species, they don't, it's from England, so they don't have Quercus garryana. They have Quercus alba, which is white oak, and that's the closest genetic match to our Oregon white oak. And I used that species as a proxy. And if the trunk was solid, it would have a basic safety factor of 11.16. But when you introduce the decay, it only reduced it to 6.27. The program will provide modeled reduction to bring it within the desired safety factor. So if I had said the desired safety factor should be 10 and our residual safety factor is 6.27, it would map how much reduction we want if we want a safety factor of 10. I did not go through that exercise just because this model basically says with the amount of sound wood around the perimeter of the trunk where we measured it, there's a robust safety factor. And this should give some confidence that the risk of whole tree failure is within an acceptable range. And that it is based on some sophisticated math, but and how likely trees are to fail. Notably, if you get below 80%, the modeling in the way that a tree will fracture changes, and that's why they have a 80% threshold on doing the model.
All right, and with that, I know we've put a lot of information out there for you. I'm glad Rick was able to get back because, again, as I kind of started out, Rick, the huge benefit is that Rick has been up in this tree. He's seen every failure that's documented, has touched all of those areas, taken samples, probed. And if you have specific questions about any parts of this tree, we can answer those and kind of have an overall discussion about risk management.
So Mayor, would you like to have questions now, or do you want me to give you just the brief overview of some of our preliminary cost projections and then do questions and answers?
I think probably just do the cost estimates and then do that because there might be conversation added to that.
So Todd, if you could unshare, I will share my screen. Okay. So the first screen that I am going to share is this is just a slide that summarizes some of the initial work that our staff has done to take a look at the data and the information that Todd and Rick provided in their report. And we took a look at their recommended option B and then removal. And the initial estimates, and I'm going to share with you a spreadsheet here shortly that shows you kind of how we came up with those numbers and the different things that we're looking at. And this will very specifically get to Councilmember Jefferson's question about costs from one thing to another. But these are just preliminary numbers that we were able to garner. There are a lot of different factors that go into these numbers, especially recommended option B. You know, there's still a lot of work. I think that both Todd and Rick pointed out that there's still a lot of work. If we decide we want to try and retain the tree, there's still a lot of data and information that we've got to figure out in terms of, you know, what is the best support system for this particular situation. And, you know, there's cost benefit analysis that goes into that as well. So lots of different factors that we still need to consider. On the bottom of this slide, you see generally some steps in the process that we would have to take to retain the tree. We are required to get DAHP permits currently. At least that is what we have chosen to do at this point. Instead of, you know, arguing if those permits are required, we have just moved forward and obtained the permits. We would have to advertise and select contractors to implement these, both on a, you know, on an ongoing basis, monitoring basis. Are we going to use our own staff? Are we going to use a contracted staff? Once we hire our urban forester, for example, we need to develop an actual work plan for how these different steps happen and in what order. And then we would need to have the work implemented. And again, this is essentially a 5-year analysis. So you know, there's ongoing work that would have to happen throughout that 5 years, and the work plan and the implementation strategy would need to take all of that into consideration. So the next thing that I want to share with you is just, and this is very preliminary. So but this is the start of what we've been working on at the staff level in terms of taking the information and data that Rick and Todd provided us. Are you seeing a spreadsheet?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we are.
So, for example, the basic pruning monitoring, the estimate, I believe, from the Prager report is $2,000 for limited deadwood pruning. There is a qualifier that says we don't know exactly what traffic control would cost. From our perspective, traffic control has, you know, variables, right? If our staff provides it, maybe it's not a direct cost, but it certainly is a cost in terms of staff time. And if we have to hire a company to do traffic control because our crews are busy doing other things, then that would be a direct cost. So this is just an example of what we started working on in terms of understanding the actual costs associated with implementing the different strategies. And it's a work in progress, which is why you see yellow on it. So it should have a watermark. We'll put a watermark on there that says draft. But it is something that we are continuing to work on to try and refine our understanding of if we were to move forward with any of these risk management options, what it would actually cost. So that is work yet to come. And so with that, I think, Mayor, if you are okay with it, we can have Todd and Rick answer questions. I can answer anything that may be specific to the city, but.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions. Is there any questions? Because I mean, that's a lot to take in and the report is large. Councilmember Althouse, are you?
Yeah, I guess I'm just sort of curious about how we sort of, maybe this is like too in the weeds, but when it comes to like maintenance of something that's a long-term community asset, is that like a Parks and Rec expense that gets built into their budget? Does that enter sort of the long-term capital maintenance facilities kind of budget? And like to some extent all dollars are green, but we do have certain funds from Parks and Rec from individual different revenue sources that are different. So I guess I'm sort of curious about that from a logistical finance perspective.
Yeah. So barring any potential eligibility for grants, maybe historic preservation grants, there may be some of those out there. I don't know that. But I think primarily this is going to be a general fund cost. You know, there may be some costs that could be covered. For example, our urban forester position is going to be partially funded through the stormwater utility, but for the most part, these are general fund costs. Whether it's Parks and Rec, you know, the impacts of TED for traffic control or those types of things, but this is going to be very likely a general fund expense.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Gotti?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is to Rick and Todd. So you showed a slide that has that shows the rate of decay and of that nature. So my question is, are you able to do or to calculate based upon the decayed core what the rate of decay is per year and how long are we looking at before that decay actually overtook the whole tree?
I can take a crack at that. The short answer is no, we can't calculate the rate of decay. The longer answer gets into the ways that trees decay, and that it gets complex. The trees are adapted to having a lot of decay, and they've had millions of years of co-evolving with the fungi that live with them. And as the tree puts on new growth, it compartmentalizes the internal decay. So just because so depending on how it's occurring, decay can get compartmentalized and it doesn't necessarily expand at a consistent rate through time. Oregon mined oak is generally considered to be decay resistant species compared to, say, cottonwood. Like if this was a cottonwood and we ran it through all these models, it would be a much different outcome. And then the central column, it just gets much more complex with the differences between heartwood, sapwood, and then the central column isn't doing much to support the tree compared to the outer wood. I think one practical answer is that the rate of decay is probably quite slow in relation to the residual strength of the tree. So the decay that's occurring is probably happening at a fairly slow rate as far as a human timeline in managing the tree, if that helps.
I just might want to add into that, Peter, this is kind of where there needs to be a commitment to having continued assessments done every so many years to see if there is changes and what is causing changes. You're on mute, Peter. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. So currently, right, if I'm correct, the picture that you show in that slide have from 10% to 20%. Is that showing the current growth area around the trunk? Is that what that is?
Yeah, the color, the blue is really good wood, the green is pretty good wood, and then it goes worse into the color schemes where there might be no wood in the very center of the base of the tree.
Thank you.
And just as you're having the discussion, if you want me to bring up any pictures and share the screen from the presentation, I can do so. And I also wanted to kind of second what Mayor Sullivan said, was we've created essentially a baseline of decay, and through ongoing monitoring, you can start to identify the rate of spread through future readings, sonic tomography readings. So that would be a cost that would be ongoing into the future.
I would add, if you want to dig into the kind of the science of the load bearing capacity of hollow trees, the attachments with the tree calc model provide some of that deeper dive into the science behind how that works. If you're wanting to understand that a bit more, we included that for that purpose.
Great. Councilor Swarthout?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a funding question. There was a time when we had a funding opportunity for the public and ourselves for to save the Brew Tower. And so I'm wondering if if the tree, there's been such an interest in the tree and all about if there's any possibility of establishing a fund or anything like that. And I don't know if that's a possibility that could be set up for people. So I'm just throwing that out if that's even a possibility that we could do.
Yes, I believe that is possible. There would need to be, factors set up. It would probably have to be some sort of maybe even an external or a special fund. I don't know if Troy or Karen have anything to add to this, but I believe it's possible. And it's something that could be pursued. Troy, do you have any further information on whether or not we could set up a special fund that could collect donations to help us with this?
I would start with Karen on that, but I think it's probably possible. And yes, we would, as long as it was legal for us to do it, we could set something up to specially track that money to make sure it was only spent for the intended purpose.
The answer is yes.
All three of us agree. That's good.
Yeah, and like so many things, everybody's enthusiastic in the beginning. Are they still going to be enthusiastic 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because, people really, 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 really have short term and they really lose interest. So to maintain this tree, we have to have a very substantial plan for as long as that tree stands. Because we're talking how many more city councils that will be in the future for this tree. And, we need to make sure that something is solid and written, that certain criteria are met as long as this tree is standing. So, Councilmember Dahlhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Along those lines, I appreciate you for that reminder as the municipal code updates for the Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission. So we mitigate this happening with any other tree or this tree. So thank you, Mayor, for that. The one thing I had is, has the position description been written for the urban forester?
The urban forester has been on the streets and we have, I believe, 6 very qualified applicants.
So is there an opportunity in that job application for the monitoring, right? So that table that you have crafted as that part of their job?
It could be, the position is set up to be supportive of the stormwater utility and its needs, because that's how we justify using stormwater fund revenue to pay a portion of that position. And the other portion of it comes out of the general fund and is intended to be a technical support person for all of our tree code implementation. Like when there's a development permit review or a development permit application or a tree removal permit. And we are requiring that it be a certified arborist with qualifications that could very likely have this be a component of their job description. I think Todd or Rick could probably answer easier if that's, that might work on every year you could have a person do that. But I think the other thing is that the evaluation that these guys did is massively more intensive than anything that was done previously. And so if you want to match that in like a 5-year time frame, I would think we would want to be able to do that. In that case, we would have to hire similar consultants, right? The aerial arborists was a sub-consultant to Todd and Rick. The sonic tomography is right now limited in terms of the equipment to do that. So yes, it can. And it could be that there is still a need for consulting arborists, at least on maybe a longer periodic basis, like once every 3 years or 5 years, that type of thing.
Thank you. The one thing in addition to that is that draft table that you presented. Thank you. Great start. And when we say general fund, I don't think people realize that we almost have 30 different line items for, but are we up to 30 now? So as we move forward with that table, if there could be a reference to where those costs are coming from, if it's coming from the tree fund or parks, but also when getting those quotes, if we can also refer to the DES statewide contracts, there's a ton of services and a lot of them are environmental in nature where you get a better deal. So if we could just reference, so then we know where everything could potentially be coming from in the general fund and then where those costs are coming from. So thanks, Lisa. I
Certainly.
appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Councilmember Kathy.
I'll get there. Just kind of slow tonight. Yeah. I wanted to make a comment. It's kind of off of what the mayor said, only on the other side of that, which is I feel like things that have to do with the environment and trees and water and streams and air and all of that stuff is becoming more and more and more and more important to people. And so as far as a fading interest in this community and so forth for saving a historic tree, I think we saw some of the response early on in this. And I personally just don't think it's a big chance to invest in something that is historic and that garners a lot of people's attention across ages and ages and so forth. And Tumwater has always been a bit risk resistant in a lot of ways. And it gets frustrating at times. And not just for me, I want to own that, but I do want to own that. But for people in the community also. And I would like to see us do something really bold, if that's what it is, or if it seems financially way out there. There are more opportunities to get funding in the environmental sphere of things nowadays. And also, like I am 100% backing what Councilmember Swarthoff said about people start foundations or they start different kinds of things to do that. And I think that, I mean, we got responses for the first time around from people out of the state, out of the United States, who care about this issue, the environmental issues of climate change and so forth. So I think we're right in the midst of a good time to take a risk, and also I think a critical time to step up and say, we believe in the historic, this tree being a guide to a trail that created Tumwater and all the things that went on beneath that tree as Indigenous people celebrated and people lit fires for others to find their way to the tree. I mean, there is so much, and there is such change and disrespect going on in our country about things, and maybe old things and scary things. I think Tumwater has an opportunity here to say, yeah, we believe we can contribute to our history and to saving the planet. And I really would like to look at some ways for alternative funding and for a foundation or something for people to give to this. I think it makes us look like we're proud. So, Nothing personal, Mayor. Thanks.
Councilmember Von Holtz.
Thank you, Mayor. I am with both council members Swarthout and Kathy, and I'm wondering if this isn't an opportunity for us to put our tree board and historic commission to work and have them work together to develop a plan of how we could perhaps raise funds. I'm also thinking of my time at the Evergreen State College, where they have sequoias that are not native to Washington State, that every month the maintenance crews at Evergreen are out caring for those trees, trimming them, maintaining them, understanding that that's part of Evergreen, and it's important to the faculty, the students, the alum. And like Councilmember Kathy was saying, this tree we've learned through hundreds of emails and public comment. I think I've only gotten one email with someone who wants the tree to be removed. That this isn't a flash in the pan. People love this tree and it's important. And so I just wonder if this isn't a good opportunity to put the people who are on our boards and commissions to a great project of seeing how we can fund saving this tree.
Thank you. Yeah, so how I view this is that once the council is going to have to make a commitment here of which option we're going to choose. And there's going to be budget adjustments for our biennium budget in this, no matter what decision is made. But we're going to have to work on making this, if option B is the selection, moving this forward to make sure that future councils, future everything maintains this, and it's not just, 10 years from now, there's a council that says, oh, it's not important anymore. Because Councilmember Kathy, you've known how much councils have changed over the last 20 some years and their vision and what they want, with me being on the planning commission like 22 years ago and stuff. I've watched the progression of how councils change, their priorities change, what they plan to focus on changes. So I want to make sure that whatever we choose to do is solidified to make sure that it is maintained and managed into the future, so that it is not, that we hold other councils in the future responsible for what happens, if it's every 3 years or every 5 year assessments, whatever is chosen, that those things happen. So that's my point. Councilmember Dalhoff, you had something else?
Thanks, Mayor. I dig your comment going along with the municipal codes, right? And then what does it look like to have a joint meeting with the tree board, historic preservation, and council once all this goes through, to really document what you're saying so that there is no question? It's in our municipal codes, right? That process. So I appreciate that. And it's timely and another great opportunity to better collaborate with our tree board and historic preservation. So thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? So I cannot, Councilmember Kathy, did you have something else?
Thanks, Mayor. I did. I just wanted to know, are we going to talk about this again, or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this will be an ongoing discussion. This is not a once discussion. We'll be working on this for a period of time. No, this is not just tonight and that's it. No.
Yeah, I just wanted to know I had reason to stay alive for all this. The reason I'm asking is, we're talking about it tonight. Do we have an idea of what steps we have to do next? Are we going to get into the weeds before we decide an option, or are we going to do this in a step kind of way? I guess is what I'm asking. So there's not big gaps between how we get where we want to go.
So what I will say from my perspective, Councilmember Kathy, is Staff is already in the weeds on this. That was the spreadsheet that you saw. That was an initial work plan. We would need to talk through specific strategies, work plans, that type of thing. And so, yes, staff continues to work on this. As we have an opportunity, we continue to have discussions about this process at our management team meetings on a weekly basis. And I would say that it probably is going to be a period of time, I don't know, a few weeks at least, if not a month or more, before we can come back to you with any specifics, because there's a lot to digest here. And I think I've said it once already tonight, and I think, Todd and Rick indicated this as well. There's still more to understand about those alternatives, right? This is our first blush. So if we do decide, for example, that we're going to take option B, we need to dig into the weeds even further, right? So we're starting into the weeds with what we've got already. We need to know even more if we're going to be looking at that and needing to make a specific decision. So
sounds like a pretty weedy deal to me.
yes, very, very.
A lot of weedy stuff. So as you and staff are looking at this, I would think that the numbers that you're coming up with or working with are as expensive as we're looking at, because it's the beginning, it's the starting, it's kind of like getting a startup. So as we look at those numbers to project them out as that's the way it's going to be every year or every 5 years or whatever. Anyway, I'm probably stating the obvious to you people who do this kind of work, but I just start this and get going and, look into how we would do some fundraising or different things like that.
Yeah.
It takes more to get started.
Yeah, absolutely.
And more money.
Yeah, and anything that we do that has this sort of physical component to it, initial startup costs a bunch more than necessarily on an ongoing basis. And there's ongoing maintenance that has to be done. Like Todd even talked about, the cabling system. If you have some sort of a cabling or support system, you have to monitor that, right? And adjust it as things change, as the tree adjusts and as the cable or whatever mechanism changes and weathers, so there are, just like any infrastructure that we provide, any infrastructure system we provide, there's ongoing maintenance, and we are very conservative in our estimates so that we can ensure that if we're going to do that, we're going to do a good job.
I'm with you. Yep.
Mayor, can I
say to Todd and help me, I'm having a blank. Rick. I was thinking of every other name but Rick. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the work that you've done and how you've done it. And it's very professional, but it's really down to earth, literally and figuratively. And I appreciate you taking all this time to come and talk to us and listen to us, and Godspeed.
I wanted to say the same thing, Councilmember Kathy, if I may. I'm very appreciative of both Rick and Todd. They've been very educational. We've learned a lot. I didn't ever expect to know much about an arborist and what they do, but when I was a community development director, I didn't really want to know about wastewater treatment plants either, but that's what you need to know. So I'm very appreciative of all of their time, their care, their professionalism, very much appreciative of that, and grateful for the information that we have at this point.
Thank you.
And I also want to express my gratitude because, when I first made the decision that we needed to have a second opinion on this, that was very hard. And then it's like, what do you look for? And Todd and Rick exceeded my expectations of what I would find for having someone of a second opinion. It's kind of like having a really bad diagnosis, health diagnosis, and then you're getting the second opinion. And I think that what we got was the absolute masters of doing this. So I totally appreciate this. And this gives us something so solid to make decisions and to move forward and have a good idea of what it is that we need to do moving forward in the future. So, and Todd and Rick have been just amazing to work with. So I totally appreciate all of these meetings that you've been having and all of this. And I really appreciate the fact that that they also had experience with this type of tree and not doing the guessing. That I think that made such a significant difference that I really appreciate it. So
Yeah,
anything else?
I wanted to just add that it's really been a pleasure for Rick and I working with the city. It's can be difficult to keep an open mind on when you're going into a project like that. And I feel like all of us have done that and kind of let the information and analysis guide us and not have any preconceived notions coming into it. So the more information we had, we took it and discussed it, with the city, and it's really been a collaborative effort in understanding the city's perspective, the science, and kind of melding it together and having a kind of a good outcome that you can hopefully make a informed decision moving forward.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Is there any other questions or? So I appreciate it. We'll let you get back to your work. And so our next item is the lease agreement with Kaufman's Holding LLC for 821 Airport Court. And Chuck, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Chuck Denny, Parks and Recreation Director, hopefully coming to you tonight with a pretty straightforward lease agreement. As you probably remember through our budgeting process late last year, we included in our budgeting requests funds to allow the Parks and Recreation Department, Administration Department, which is located at City Hall, to lease a new space and move out of City Hall. With the full staffing of the police department and the addition of the body-worn camera program, the police department is out of room and doesn't have adequate space to accommodate new staff or new programs. So we determined as a management team that it made the most sense for my department to move out of City Hall into a new space. And really starting about October last year, we started evaluating available spaces in the city of Tumwater, both on size, price, and what would be required to turn the space into an office that would accommodate the functions of Parks and Recreation Administration. So we came up with about 5 different spaces that kind of met our needs. Fortunately, we found one near the airport. In fact, just east of where the Davis Meeker Oak is. That was the least costly and set up in the best way to accommodate office space, public interaction, and the moves that we needed to make to accommodate what we do in Parks and Recreation Administration. It's also giving us an opportunity. We have staff in our department, many different divisions. We have staff in 5 different buildings throughout the city. This move is giving us an opportunity to become a little more efficient and shift some of those staffs from one building to the other. So we'll be taking our admin staff as well as myself. We'll be taking our recreation manager, the arts coordinator, and the volunteer coordinator from Old Town Center, and moving them to this new space with us. That makes the most sense from a supervision standpoint and a programmatic standpoint, as well as with admin support. And we'll be taking the current recreation supervisor and sending him to Old Town Center as the direct report for all the recreation coordinators that work there, so they can be a more cohesive team and work together in one facility. It's a 3-year lease agreement with Kaufman Holdings for this building. It was formerly used during COVID by Washington State DOT as an office space. They remodeled it, which is perfect for us and allows us to move in with really very few improvements needed for the space. Monthly rent is $6,600, which fits into our estimated budget that we had approved through 25-26. So we're looking to move as quickly as possible. We're hoping to be out of our office sometime in April, and then begin remodeling the existing Parks and Recreation space into a configuration that the police can use, and they hope to be fully functioning and up to speed in that space by July 1st. So it's kind of a quick calendar for all of these things to take place, but I think we're on the right track. So what I'm hoping tonight is that you will agree to put this on the consent calendar on at the March 18th meeting with a recommendation and authorization for the mayor to sign. And with that, I will give it back to you. If you have any questions, I would be happy to respond to those.
Councilor Abdallah?
Thanks, Mayor. Chuck, do you have a table to show all the locations you looked at, square footage, pros and cons, and the costs of all of that?
I do not. I have all the information. I could easily put that together if you would like to see it.
Yeah, I would actually.
Okay.
Councilor
Thanks, Chuck.
Sorka?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'm nerding out. I was looking at the contract because it's $6,600 a month, and then it says a monthly estimated triple net, and it says $1,705. What is triple net?
Yeah, triple net is standard in a lease agreement. It's basically utilities.
Okay.
Any monthly charges that we have at the facility. That's an estimated amount.
Okay.
It depends on how much water, sewer, garbage that we actually use.
Thank you. Hadn't seen that term before. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, am I seeing consensus to have this on the consent calendar? All right, it looks like we can go ahead and put that on the consent calendar.
Could we, if you wanted to move it forward with a recommendation, that would require a motion.
Okay. All right, so I will formally do that, since I always try to avoid official motions at council meeting or council work sessions. So all in favor of moving this to the consent calendar for our next meeting, signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed, nay. All right, we're good. And then I believe Councilmember Dalhoff, you'll get the information you're looking for before the next meeting. So, all right. So with that, we're now at the, thank you, Chuck, appreciate that. The next item is the Mayor City Administrator report, and we'll start out with Administrator Parks.
I don't have anything particular tonight, Mayor, unless anybody has any questions.
No, and I really don't have anything either. It's been, Councilmember Swartz, thought you had something?
I didn't want to interrupt your speech, but I did want to ask if there was going to be an opportunity for Chuck Denny to share his travel adventures to Mount Kilimanjaro and the safari. I think that is very worthy of a work session. So you and your teammate, we deserve a travel show. So just saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea. Yeah. So since we all can travel there by proxy, right? So, all right. And I actually don't have anything at this time. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you everyone. And we will see everyone next Tuesday. We are adjourned.